Great, thank you very much. I'm Rebecca Russell-Bennett, and I'm the co-host of SERVSIG 2020. I hope you enjoyed our little opening bit of music. Video killed the radio star. I guess we'll be chatting today potentially about whether robots can kill the YouTube star, if we were to put it into a bit of a modern context. So welcome everyone. Just a few housekeeping rules. Just make sure your microphone and camera are turned off for now, just to conserve some bandwidth. Please use the chat tool to ask questions, and if you can't hear us, just check if your device speakers are muted, and just act accordingly. Okay, I'm going to be handing over now to Professor Gabby Oderkoken, who is joining us from Maastricht at 10 p.m. at night in the Netherlands. Gabby is well known to the SERVSIG community. She has extensive research in the field of marketing, particular interest in the area of robotics and AI, and particularly frontline service. Gabby is extremely well published, and for me, more importantly, she's a really lovely person. So I'm very happy to hand over to Gabby, who's going to be our facilitator for the session, and she will be introducing all of our speakers and managing the discussion. So over to you now, Gabby.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's good that I have this flashing light on my face because I'm blushing now with all these kind words. I'll start sharing my screen. So that implies that we stop sharing yours. I hope that's no problem. Let me see. I have to share the right screen. It's this one here. Good. Yes, a warm welcome on behalf of the Maastricht crew here. It's the next event in our virtual SERVSIG 2020 conference, The Future of Services, a Technology Perspective. And I'm really honored to facilitate this session tonight or this morning, depending on where you are. We have three wonderful speakers, Dietmar Goedmacher, Monica Bradley, and Danny Deng and his team from Maastricht, but I'll introduce everyone in a bit. So for today's session, we'll build on the last session, innovation by keeping human at the center. Dave Fisk and Jonathan Roberts and Julie Salisbury and Kara Walsh. I think what we have in common is that we acknowledge that innovation in services is really needed. And in order to enable innovation, we really need both the human and technology. And I think our speakers tonight will also illustrate why this dichotomy is really important, because it's not either or. And if we look at tonight's session, I think all of us would have loved to be back in a physical session. In 2016, we were really honored to host all of you in Maastricht. I hope you also cherish the great memories we made back then. We felt it like a privilege to have you all over in our beautiful, beautiful city. And it's so bad that no one is allowed to travel now. And I hope everyone is safe and healthy, because that's the only thing that, that is important now and that we do care about. And we are very grateful to the Brisbane SERVSIG 2020 team that we are able to have these virtual conference sessions instead. I think thanks to technology, this service offering is taking place, which is a nice bridge also to tonight's theme. If we look at the theme more in specific, and there are many people joining, so welcome to all of you. My slides are stuck at the moment, so let me see how I can move them forward in one way or the other. Here we go. If we look at recent academic research, there are lots of published articles on the role of technology in services, and I saw many authors also joining tonight's call, so warm welcome to everyone. And I think it's a very broad theme, ranging from artificial intelligence to robots to an emphasis on frontline services and everything in between. it's very hard to envision any service without technology at the moment. If we look at our teaching services nowadays, I really wouldn't know how we would have survived without technology. All of us are teaching online. We are using online technology and support tools to provide our students with the best teaching experience possible, given these crazy times. So that is we are all facing, and I think it's a very intriguing topic. We are only at the very first early stages now, so there's still a lot to explore in terms of research. A small bridge to our own research in Maastricht. My slides, yeah. So Maastricht University is in the very south of the Netherlands, or in the very center of Europe. It's a European university. Maastricht is also known for our famous violin player, André Rieu. I know that many people from Australia fly to the Netherlands to see one of his concerts. But most important is that in Maastricht, Nick Marr and myself, we are establishing a research group on robotics in services, really focusing on the impact of technology on the customer experience, on the behavior of all the partners and actors in the network. And yeah, we are really delighted with all the collaborations that we have with industry partners, because we are doing research, but we also need an experimental setting, like we have at the Zuiderland Medical Center, at Dada One Fusion Restaurants, and also with the Heer Medicom, who enable us in their robotics services. Good, these were my 5 minutes that I was allowed to speak. Just for your interest, if you would like to read more of our group, we recently produced a non-academic video on our work, which is really accessible. You can find it on YouTube, and I also included a selection of recent journal publications for your interest. And then I think many more people are still joining. A warm welcome to everyone. I'm delighted and honored to introduce our first to you, Professor Dietmar Hoedmacher. And he left his very successful career in the medical device and biotech industry for an equally successful career in academia. In 2007, he joined the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane at 2 faculties of Science and Engineering and at Health. And his CV is way too long for me to give him a proper introduction, but his experience clearly demonstrates the interdisciplinary expertise needed to understand the complex and evolving service industry. And in his presentation today, he will share his perspective on the role of technology in services. Dietmar, the floor is yours. I'll stop sharing and then you can share your screen.
Thank you, Gabby. Welcome everybody. And I'd like to thank Rebecca for inviting me to give this talk. So the reason why I'm actually speaking today is because Rebecca and we are part of a center at QUT for behavioral economics, science and technology. And based on the work we are doing there, which I will share with you in a minute a little bit, she asked me to talk a little bit about the future perspectives in the healthcare side, and specifically not so much in the area of robotics, but in the area of 3D printing. So firstly, I have a disclaimer. I'm a founder and shareholder of a number of companies, and just want to disclaim this. So in our center, we have different themes, and I'm the theme leader for biomedical innovation and behavioral change. So this is the team and our leads here. And as I mentioned before, I lead the team biomedical innovation and behavioral change. So my talk today is with the outline you see here. So I will give a brief introduction about myself. Then I will capture some of the 3D printing projects which can have a big impact in healthcare. So it is way too big topic to really cover this in great depth. And I guess you all know that when you open up your web portals in the morning, there will be at least 10 news about 3D printing breakthroughs in different areas, many in the healthcare, and I will be only able to touch on some of them. The point I also want to make is that obviously, like in many new areas, I think in the business world, one talks about disruptive technologies, that even so the technology is disruptive, there are a lot of developments which will never see the market and will never have an impact. So it is quite important to filter through what could be really a breakthrough and what isn't. And unfortunately, a lot of the academic work often has a lot of hype, but will never lead to a breakthrough. So that's just a side comment I want to make, especially in the area of healthcare, where the development times often are very long. So then I will lead into that, again, one of the motivations for me to move into the behavioral economics is because we have translated some of our technologies into the clinic. And even so, one might think they will have a lot of benefits, especially for the patient and the healthcare system. We are often seeing that the adoption is very slow, and that one of the reasons is the behavioral side by the clinicians, the surgeons, or the patients, and we want to do more research to understand that better, to then find out what are better strategies to really translate those technologies into healthcare. And then I will make some concluding remarks and just very briefly show some of our future work. So a brief introduction of my background. So I have been studying in Germany. I'm trained as an engineer. Then I went to the US for a year and worked with actually one of the Dutch pioneers in the field of artificial organs, with Professor Willem Kolff, who went to the US many years ago. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. So he was the inventor actually of the first dialysis machine. And then he started an institute for artificial organs in Salt Lake City in Utah, and was very fortunate that I could spend 1 year with him and do research there, which really was very instrumental for my career, to see how an interdisciplinary team is set up. Then I went back to Germany, started a career in industry, did an MBA, and then after 10 years decided to go back to academia. Then I did my PhD in Singapore at NUS. And then, as Monica mentioned, I started in 2007 at QUT. So I'm today directing the Center for Additive Biomanufacturing. So this is a training center for PhD students, where, as we say in QUT, train the students in the real world. This is with 4 other universities, and quite importantly also with industry partners. So all our PhD students spend anything between 6 and 12 months doing their PhD with our industry partners. And here you see our slogan: we really want to discover, we want to innovate, and we want to translate. So this is really what we like to do. And there is a big focus on again, additive manufacturing. So additive manufacturing is really the industry term for 3D printing. So that's where we have a number of projects. And then down here you see again, we focus on technology. Materials is a big part, and then also the clinical translation, which is quite important for us. So I also thought before I talk too much about myself, I show you this little clip, which gives you some more insight about what we do.
We can't see it, Dietmar.
My name is Dietmar Ulbacher. and I'm a professor for
Fancy.
medicine at the
We heard it, but we couldn't see it.
Okay.
It's still the first slide with the two links that we see.
Okay, let me see.
You have still the PowerPoint shared. So
Yeah, is it now?
yeah, that's
Queensland University of Technology. The future
Sure.
of 3D printing is already present. 3D printing is around us in an aeroplane. Parts of the engines are 3D printed. 3D printing is a process where after we have done a design, instead of taking a big piece of metal and then cutting this based on the drawing to the part we want, we are building now layer by layer. So some of my work is also related to broken bones. So we basically 3D print two things. We 3D print the model of the bone, and we 3D print the scaffold, which allows to regenerate the bone. And then the two come together, and both parts are 3D printed. We take, for example, your cells from any part of your body, and then we can take those cells, and then we can use these cells, put them into our bioinks, and then print them out. And then when we put them in the body, then they will help the body to regenerate. And we would print the exact replica of the piece which would be missing, which are implanted into the defect, and then transplant the scaffold together with tissue into the defect. And after 2 to 3 years, the patient would be left only with his own bone, because the polymer we are using to 3D print the scaffolds is biodegradable.
So this is a specialized printer that can print hydrogels with cells. The way this works is that we have printing cartridges which contain our hydrogel material. Other typical printers that we have in the laboratory print plastic materials. However, hydrogels are very, very soft materials that are very similar to jello. This allows us to create tissues that are very soft in nature.
Cartilage is a tissue which is always at our joints. We can now 3D print cartilage cells. So you have now a very flexible component in between, which is uniting these two bones and allows the bone to work with each other so that we can walk and have movements.
Okay, so this all sounds very exciting, and it is. But one of the important aspects for us is the long development time, right? So we have been in the clinic with our bone scaffolds for many years now, but it took about 10 years to get there. So this is, I think, quite important. And there is a long way with a lot of research. And compared to a lot of other industries, that's always something we have to keep in mind. And therefore, again, a lot of the technologies actually fail because the research is done, but then the translation path is not taken for many reasons. Sometimes it's the funding, but often also that from the academic side, it's not really the motivation to go such a long way to bring things into the clinic. It's better to move to the next project, produce data, and then publish. And that is really something which I try to change in really inspiring my students, that they become entrepreneurs and that what they have developed in my lab take up and then try to translate into products. So as I mentioned before, as you have seen, what we do is just a snapshot on how 3D printing or additive manufacturing can be used in healthcare. There are many, many more applications. And again, based on time, I cannot go into all of those. But I thought that another very interesting area where there are already a lot of breakthroughs, and I see many more in the healthcare area, is this one. And this is the area where now a number of groups around the world are 3D printing tablets or medication, right? So here you see one of the publications, and one
We
of
still
the
see your video, Dietmar. Probably you want to switch to your PowerPoint.
Yeah, sorry, that's the same thing again. Now, is it there? Is the PowerPoint there?
Yes, the PowerPoint is there now.
Yeah, okay, good. Sorry. Yeah, so it's the drug therapy, the tablets. So this obviously is a huge market. There's a lot of marketing from the pharmaceutical companies. But one of the issue is, again, we all have seen this in the news, that a lot of the medication which is prescribed are actually not used and end up, for many reasons, in our drawers, and they hang around there for a longer time, and they can't be used anymore, and so on. And one of the things is that obviously as older we get, as more our health is getting into the action that we need to take drugs, and then it becomes very complex that we have overlying problems like a cardiovascular disease with a kidney disease and so on. And then we need to take many drugs. We need to take them at different time points. We get older and older. We get more forgetful, and it becomes very complex. And therefore, again, a lot of patients are taking like 10, 12 tablets per day, 4 different ones in the morning, another 4 at lunchtime, and then 4 in the evening. And often it's very difficult for them, especially again, for old people when again, it becomes very difficult for them to remember. And therefore, the idea came up to use now 3D printing to put all the medication into one pill, that you only swallow one pill. Obviously, there are other issues with you know, that some people have issues in respect to the taste of the medication. Also, some tablets really taste awful. So that's another way where you can innovate with 3D printing medication, that you can bring in taste points where it becomes much easier and so on. So again, many advantages if you would be able to 3D print drugs on demand. Right, so the big idea would be, so you would go to the doctor would do a diagnosis, you would prescribe a drug. So instead of going to the pharmacy where you would get a package with 40, 50 pills, the pharmacy would 3D print now the medication. So is that reality? It is. So a lot of groups have been working on this for a number of years. And again, very importantly, this has a very long development time, right? So people started out more than 10 years ago. This idea is more than 10 years old, where people posted the ideas, started working on it. But now we have the first FDA approved pill from a US startup company. And here again, you see the concept. So these colors reflect now 4 different types of drugs. So drug number 1 would be yellow, drug number 2 would be red, the light blue would be this drug, and then you would have another drug in all into one pill, which obviously would have a lot of advantages, right? But obviously there's also a lot of technological issues you have to solve. And the other important aspect is in respect to healthcare and innovation. And I say it again, the development time, right? Because normally the yellow drug would be developed, would be studied in a clinical trial, and then could be used after many years. The red drug would be developed, would be studied, clinical trials. So now you have to prove that putting all 4 drugs together into one also would have clinical efficacy. And you also need to study the drugs in its single form. So it's very complex and very expensive. But again, as the advantages are so big, companies have tackled this, and this is the startup company, which is really making big breakthroughs, again, specifically with having this now FDA approved for the first drug. And there are now a lot of developments, and there are many followers of this technology. And I think we will see in the next 5 years a lot of breakthroughs. And most likely in 10 years, you will have 3D printers in a lot of pharmacies, which will 3D print your drugs which you are taking. So this is something I foresee as a very big breakthrough in the future. Okay, so I will skip the video because of time. So again, for our side, I mentioned in the video before a big breakthrough in the scaffold bone tissue engineering. And it's very rewarding for me as a researcher to really help patients. And I would like to show you another video clip.
Meet 27-year-old Ruben Lichter, who's making medical history.
An infection had out basically my entire tibia bone. So it was either amputation above the knee, or I could try this experimental procedure.
It was something that had never been done before, and Ruben came along as an ideal candidate to embark on what is world-first surgery.
Last month, Ruben had a 3D printed bone scaffold implanted into his leg at Brisbane's Princess Alexandra Hospital, and the 14-hour surgery was nothing short of miraculous.
This is an exact model of Ruben's leg before the operation. So there's quite a lot of bone missing there, 36 centimetres in fact. And then to bridge that gap, we've used these 3D printed models which slot into the bony defect. And then to create living bone, what we've had to do is line the inside of the 3D scaffold with biological tissue. And that tissue has come from the adjacent fibular bone with its blood supply intact, and then a transplant from the knee of the opposite side. Then the roof of the scaffold is put on top, and then we wait for the bone to form.
The scaffold was designed here at the University of Technology, Queensland, by Professor Dietmar Hutmacher.
So it took us to be used on humans a development time, a total of 10 years. So we did a number of preclinical studies where we proved the concept that this patient-specific scaffolds would really regenerate large bone defects.
And he has high hopes for what his designs will do for medicine in the future.
Bone tissue engineering is one program we work on, but another big program where we actually also have a lot of preclinical data is in the area of breast tissue engineering. And what we can foresee, if everything works well, we will start a clinical trial by the end of next year for 3D printed breast scaffolds, which are for patients which undergo mastectomies.
As for Ruben, he's looking forward to keeping up with his 9-month-old son, William.
So my plans for the future, once everything sort of heals and once I get my leg back, I really want to do a lot of activities with William. I want to be able to teach him how to ride a bike and do all sporty things, run around with him, and my old life back.
Okay, so I wanted to show this because this is a big difference now between the drugs and what we do, because the major difference is the number of patients who can be treated with this technology, right? It's very rewarding when you can save the leg of a patient, but in our biggest university hospital, there are maybe 5 or 10 patients per year, right? So from a business point and marketing point of view, it's a very different concept than the 3D printed drugs, which obviously have a much larger market. And that's where we have to develop now strategies to find the concepts that we can really distribute this in large globally, but still, again, the numbers would be way smaller than 3D printing a drug. And also the development time, just to give you an idea. So we worked about 2.5 months to get where we are to treat this patient. But again, the good news is this patient is now 2.5 years out and is doing really well, and we could save his legs. So again, now that leads to the point, how can we really work and provide more evidence that these technologies which we develop, which are complex, which have very long lead times, need a significant investment, how can we really bring them into the healthcare market as an innovation? So again, we all know that there's a big hype and so on in that area. And again, I'm very interested to work with my colleagues in the behavioral economics, because what we see is, again, the adoption either from the patient or from the surgical side are very often biased. So again, when you talk to an orthopedic surgeon and you come now with a new technology, what he will tell you is that he's using for 20 years the transplantation of your own bone. So the surgeon would take the bone from your other leg, would cut a big piece out and transplant this into the defect side, which has a number of significant disadvantages, but still he has been trained to do this, and it has been shown in many operations that it works. So again, to show now the technology we have developed has biases and so on. And this is a analysis about this relationship. And again, one of the things I have seen in working with surgeons specifically for more than 3 decades now, and also having young surgeons in my team who do a PhD with me, they are not often aware about the bias. They think they are unbiased, and they think they are unbiased in the discussions they have with the patient, and often they don't understand this background, which you see here on the slide, that they are impacted by the biases and so on. And one of the things always which comes up when we have the discussion is, they tell me, but Dietmar, where is the evidence? Where is the quantitative data? Because they say, you know, I have spoken to my patient A says this, my patient B says this, and so on. So that's what we like to study in our center, and specifically in the area to breast reconstruction, which obviously is a very big health problem. It's very emotional, has many factors. And again, we have developed now a technology where we can regenerate breast tissue. And therefore, this is for us a very important market to study this. So again, in collaboration with Rebecca, we also work on these problems. And you see here, one of the problems is that the main product in the market is a silicone implant, which has significant long-term problems. You see one of the patients we studied. So the lifetime of the silicone implants, after 5 years, you have a complication rate between 2 and 5%. And after 10 years, it goes up to 10%. And then a lot of revision surgery and so on has to be performed. But again, for a plastic surgeon, he thinks this is not a big issue, because he thinks he just takes the implant out and puts the new one in, and often forgets the psychological impact on the patient and the biases in his decision from doing the surgery. So
I have a short typing and note for you. You have 5 minutes left in your presentation time.
Yeah, so I just show one more video clip to show you where we are.
Leonie Young beat breast cancer 30 years ago.
It's a shock for everyone, isn't it? Expecting it when you're so young.
Now she spends her time helping others battling the disease at the Choices Cancer and Support Centre. And more support is on its way. Researchers at the Queensland University of Technology are engineering human-like tissue using scanned images of a patient's breast. The shape is replicated using a high-tech 3D printer. That scaffolding is implanted into a patient's chest and slowly breaks down as new tissue grows around it.
It would mean a very close to realistic reproduction of a woman's breast after a mastectomy.
Being your own tissue, that it may grow or shrink with you as you put on weight or lose weight. And that's one of the problems with the implants now.
Professor Hutmacher and his team have spent 6 years developing the product. They're confident clinical trials could start as early as mid-next year. The next step, targeted chemotherapy, restricting chemicals to the specific area rather than the whole body, eliminating the worst side effects.
Hair loss, sickness, vomiting.
Every step of the way there's improvements on what's available, and I think this sounds absolutely amazing.
Queensland scientists stringing together a future of hope. Ria Abraham, 7 News.
Okay, so again, this is the area of breast tissue engineering, which we have done again the same development. Does it share? Can you see my slides again?
Europe is struggling to contain COVID-19. Infections are increasing.
No, we cannot
so
see your
are
slides,
restrictions.
Dima.
And the Dutch Prime Minister says it's the only way. We have to be stricter. But is it the only way?
Oops, sorry.
And the Dutch can know, huh? Because we have a lot of infections at the moment.
Yeah. Share.
We still see your YouTube page.
Now?
Now we can see your slide again, yeah.
Yeah.
And we have 2 more minutes left, Dietmar. I can be a very tough and strict teacher and timekeeper. Sorry for that.
That's all right. I'm almost done. So as I mentioned before, now we really have to work on these biases. And again, this is something we do in our BEST Center in collaboration with Uwe Dulek and our postdoc Stephen White. And again, we did a large analysis where we had a questionnaire which was sent out to patients, surgeons, and nurses. And one of the main questions we wanted to find out, who is really the decision maker? Because when we talk to the surgeons say the patient is the decision maker. When you talk to the patient said the surgeon is the decision maker. And then you have an intermediate of the breast nurse in between. And again, what we now could quantify is that there is this bias which we hypothesized. We could quantify that the patient thinks the surgeon makes the decision and the surgeon thinks the patient makes the decisions. And then you have the nurses in between, which also play a very important role in this communication. And we think we have to focus on this in the future. So I will stop here. Concluding remarks, I just wanted to say that there are different technologies in the healthcare market, which have different development times, which have different investment amounts which are required, which is very important. As I said, when you filter through now the news about 3D printing in healthcare, that you really do a thorough analysis, which innovation takes which investment, takes how long, and which one could be realistic. And just to finalize, what I said in this video 2 years ago has become again now reality. We did treat our first patient about 3 months ago. And again, it was very rewarding to do something for Caitlin, which you see here. And with this, I stop and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dietmar. You would get a big round of applause now if we would be in Brisbane, so a virtual round of applause this time. Welcome to all 45 participants tonight. We see indeed the virtual applause is popping up. I think your story nicely shows that technology, and in particular 3D printing, can be seen as an enabler of healthcare services, which we see as a transformative service. And as you explained, in this network of stakeholders ranging from patients and doctors to nurses, it's really important to keep all stakeholders involved. In terms of process for tonight, for those of you who just joined, a warm welcome. The idea is that at the end of all speakers, we make time for Q&A. I hope that is fine for you. Dietmar, I saw there is already a question for you. More questions are welcomed, but I suggest we save them till the very end and we can have a big panel discussion.
Yeah, that's fine for me.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. That means that we can invite and welcome our next speaker. It is my great pleasure to introduce you, and then I should take the right slide, but I'm also, there we go. To introduce you to Ms. Monica Bradley, our next panelist. She is an advisor, investor, and director for startups, academics, boards, and high growth firms. And her Brisbane-based practice works at the intersection of the now and the next to create sustainable system change. She is a respected advocate for founders, innovation, women, and impact-led adventures. And Monica held senior executive advisory roles in New York, Sydney, and Dubai in global trade, logistics, sovereign wealth funds, and public sector. Her CV is also way too long to share with you tonight, but I'm delighted to introduce you to her presentation, in which she will share 3 examples of entrepreneurs using service innovation to create positive impact for investors, the planet, and humanity. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gabby, and it's just delightful to meet all of you around the world at our various time zones. I'm paying my respect to the elders of the unceded land I'm coming from today in Brisbane, Australia. Just a little bit about me. I work at this intersection of the now and the next. What that really means is there's a lot of traditional businesses and enterprises that have produced great products and services for years.
Monica, I'm not sure you share the right screen. We have multiple screens we can see.
Oh, okay.
We see Monica's value diagram now.
Okay. What do you see now?
Now we just see all the pictures of the participants tonight. So the screen sharing stopped.
So let's go here. Is that okay?
Yeah. Designing with impact. I guess that's the first one.
Yeah. There we go. Now we're right.
That's Monica's value diagram. Fantastic.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Too many screens. So I really where I sit is I'm an investor in impact. I'm an advisor, and I sit on boards of companies that are making what I would call systems change. So the industrial age was wonderful. It brought us a lot of transformation, brought us a lot of technology. But those systems we are now discovering have actually got bias built into them. They serve very single loops. So they serve the company for which it's designed to create shareholder wealth, but in another area of society, they may be creating a negative impact. So for me, we're really working at this exciting nexus of taking technology to solve problems more holistically and remove systemic bias in all its forms out of really big systems change. So small problem to solve. So the innovation age for us is all about what I would call impact. The 3 problems I'd like to just show you examples of, because I think examples are absolutely the best way to get the idea, is we've started with some systemic problems, and 3 of them are on your screen today. I'm a co-founder in Australia of a global network called SHEO. The design problem that we began solving is that less than 2% of the world's venture capital flows to the 51% of the population that is women. The second problem I'll present today is the problem that 50% of prisoners are reoffending at a cost of $2 billion to society and to those individuals. And that's through a company called Work Restart here in Queensland. And finally, as a board director, I'm interested in decarbonisation of the planet and humanity. And I've taken a role with a company in Brisbane called Containers for Change. And they've harvested 2 billion containers of PET plastic and glass out of landfill through a new system in the last 12 months. So SHEO, the problem we started with remembering, venture capital not flowing to women, systemic problem. I saw this problem firsthand sitting as a venture capital boards with my beautiful colleagues, mostly men that had great expertise, and they were not consciously biased. They would sit there and women would come and pitch, and I would get excited beyond belief to fund it. And we would come back and they'd go, I don't understand that. what is that? And I would say, are you kidding me? That is like a fantastic problem to solve. It's got a massive market appeal. So what I worked out over time is I could not get onto enough panels, nor get enough women onto those panels to fix the problem with the flow of capital. And the problem was that the wonderful men that sit in venture capital and make those decisions had not been exposed often to the problems that women wanted to solve. Women entrepreneurs, like any entrepreneur, are solving problems close to where they live, close to experiences they've had in their life, close to things that they see in their ecosystem. So that was problem number one, solving problems that may be largely invisible to some of our male colleagues that tend to spend 45 years uninterrupted in a very structured workplace, providing very well and doing a very structured job. The other problem was the way that women present the business proposition of how they will solve and take the money and invest is often different to the way that men are used to seeing behaviors and the patterns that they have established of what do successful entrepreneurs look like. So those two problems together meant that my influence was important. The way I fixed that problem was to ask my wonderful colleagues to take the pitch deck home and give it to a woman in their network that they really cared about their opinion. And in every case I did that, the men came back to the panel and they changed their mind and we invested in those women. But I could not, that is not a scalable model. So what I then did is I looked around the world and I found SheEO. SheEO is founded by a woman out of Canada called Vicky Saunders. She was a JP Morgan banker and she'd seen the same problem that I had seen. So SheEO works very simply. We organize groups of women, which we call activators. They all contribute a reasonably small amount of money, $1,100 a year or $92 a month. That money goes into a fund. So we're creating our own venture capital fund. It is then, we then invite women entrepreneurs that are solving the world's to-do list. So they must be aligned to the Sustainability Development Goals. They come in and they pitch in a very simple format that's all digitally enabled. They answer 3 questions. What is the problem in the world that I'm solving? Why am I the best person in the world to solve that problem? And if I get funded, what difference would that make to my ability to solve the problem? And on the basis of those 3 questions, note there is no financial data required in that. There is no value proposition. There is no scale model. Those 3 questions, 500 women that have created the $500,000 venture fund will then make decisions about who to shortlist. When we get to the finals, we then fund out of each cell of $500,000, 5 ventures, and those women decide how to split the $500,000 amongst themselves. The money goes in as debt, not equity, and it is paid back with 0 interest over 5 years. That is important to women because women like to see things in perpetuity. And I would say that men do as well, but it's just a particular item for women, maybe because we give birth, maybe because of our experience. But the idea that we're designing with elegance that the money keeps flowing and circulating. So we're on our way to creating a perpetual fund. This is the impact worldwide. So 5,000 women have contributed. There's a community of over 30,000 active women that provide not only capital, but advice, introductions, and assistance to the entrepreneurs to more quickly scale their businesses and grow their impact. We've funded 68 ventures in just under 3 years. We're in 5 countries and we've distributed $5 million with a repayment of 95%, even during COVID. We are on a journey to create a $1 billion fund with 1 million activators that will solve the world's to-do list. The second, I guess, service innovation I'm presenting today is a problem that is often, it's in a lot of countries, but it's not often talked about. Our Scandinavian friends have done lots of innovation in this area, and that's around prisons and around the justice system. In Australia, we have a very high level of recidivism, particularly with our First Nations Indigenous citizens. And we know the cycle of how people get to jail. What the founder, Helen Black of Work Restart has done is said, this is a solvable problem. The solution to safety in prisons is not to build more prisons. It's to look at why do people, once they're in prison, go back to prison, at least at our current stage. So we have a 50% recidivism rate here in Australia, and that's a $2.4 billion problem a year. So Helen went in and we assisted her in the trials. She recruited 20 entrepreneurs. She had a theory of change about human determination, which is on the screen, self-determination, which she had academically studied and she'd applied. When we went to the pilot trial, she invited 10 entrepreneurs, including myself, to visit the prison and do a program with prisoners that had self-selected to say, what ideas might you have to self-employ or create a business for yourself once you leave prison? And what we found in that first cohort of 20 male prisoners, mostly under the age of 25, many of whom had been repeat offenders since their early and late teens, was a tremendous amount of human ingenuity and desire to actually have a life that was outside of the justice system. What they didn't have was a capability or any mentors or any idea of how they might do that. So over a 6-week window, the 20 entrepreneurs mentored 20 prisoners. And on the outtake of that, supported by Helen's program, we helped pathway those prisoners upon release to support them to set up small businesses, to be welcomed into our startup hubs. We had a 98% of those prisoners did not reoffend. That program cost the government in a grant to Helen less than $10,000. She used volunteers. So on the basis of that program, she's now scaled up to 2 more programs. We're still working on a system to get more funding, but she's in the process of raising about $5 million. And her theory of change is that the difference is if you can give a prisoner, first of all, while they're in jail, a job or a way of how they might entrepreneurially create a way of creating value for themselves and their families, and then you can replicate that same job or enterprise once they're released with the support of people that will help mentor them, you have a very high proportion of people that will not reoffend. And so the whole idea is about prisons and industries, and then the same job outside. So Helen's on a great journey. We're helping her raise $5 million now as an impact investment. The return on that investment will be 40-fold for the investment, that not only for the government, and for those investors, they will get returns of about 10-fold on their money. The last one is where I'm a director of the container deposit scheme in Queensland, which is run by a company called Coax. And this was a problem that often in European countries you don't have, because you have very mature recycling programs. In even parts of Australia, like South Australia, we've also had quite mature programs. But in Queensland for some time, we had resisted. We had lovely yellow top bins that come to our back door. And we thought very arrogantly that we'd solved recycling, because all of us in our households put our recycled items into the yellow bin. But it turns out that about 85% of that was not getting to recycling or to any sort of useful second life, because it was commingled in a yellow bin, which contaminated the streams of both PET and glass and HDPE. So a container deposit scheme at least started to solve that problem in part by taking a large chunk of that waste, which is the beverage containers, placing a fee on every beverage container that's supplied into our supply chain in Queensland. Every beverage manufacturer pays a contribution fee. And then that system is then these consumers or businesses that then collect the empty used containers, come back to a point and are given a fee of 10 cents to return the container. What that's done is create this behavior change in citizens. In the first instance, the first people that came on board were the people that saw the money value proposition. In the second wave, and through better communications and some more focus groups with behavioural change economists, we started to attract the climate changes. And in the third wave, what we've really attracted is a substantial amount of entrepreneurs, because what we've made available are the waste streams. So now Queensland has some of the cleanest PET waste streams and glass streams, and we've really co-worked with entrepreneurs and researchers and universities in materials innovation to actually attract and say, what might we do with billions of tons of clean glass that we can now segregate? You know, how might we use robotics to use computer vision to sort the waste in a more economic way? So the first sample product out of that, which we're really pleased that we finalized before COVID this year, is to turn the waste glass streams from Queensland into bench tops that are non-silicon, that solve a problem that we have in many renovations across the world, is silicosis for the tradespeople that we're installing and modifying the silicon benches that are so beautiful presented, but cause a health issue for people as they cut into them. So we are in Queensland, there is a local company that's taken the waste glass streams and they're turning them into a beautiful alternative to that, that actually is totally workplace safely for tradies and delivers both the functionality, but also the functionality, but also the elegance that people were wanting in the silicone replacement of it. So I guess for me, I'm conscious of the time today and I really wanted to make sure we keep it punchy, and I've got plenty of time to get into questions in the Q&A, but I sit what I would call, I'm looking for systemic problems that exist in our society, and I'm looking for companions on that journey that have capital, that have talent, that have research that we can commercialize. And then I'm looking to use networks and influence of women, of entrepreneurs, of family-friendly people, of corporations that are looking for a better brand reputation, to come together in unusual configurations to really start to pilot and then systemically change and correct the systems that, you know, in many cases have excluded our First Nations, people from poor or illiterate backgrounds, but also our problems in the climate space. We've created great systems that have created great wealth for an extraordinary amounts of industry, but have created great poverty in our climate or in our people. And today, really what I wanted to present was just a small caveat of my experience with using service design principles that have a different measure and bringing collaborative methods together. So thank you, Gabby, for your time, and thank you for the audience for listening. And I'm open to questions really at the end.
Thank you so much, Monica. I think you're really a courageous, brave lady tackling the world's to-do list, as you say. Huh? So we see that service research no longer focuses on small problems, dyadic interactions, but really on the big, holistic world problems. Thanks a lot for sharing, and I'm sure we get back to you in the Q&A session later. Good, that means that we can introduce our final, but definitely not the least panelist, because I'm thrilled to introduce you to Mr. Deng and his team. He is the founder and CEO of Dadawan and runs 9 restaurants with various formulas in the Netherlands. And Dadawan is one of Maastricht University's highly esteemed industry partners for research. And in my view, Mr. Deng is a visionary and brave entrepreneur who is constantly looking for new food trends and technological developments to create the ultimate restaurant experience. Mr. Deng indicates that inspiration means traveling to him, as he wants to see, feel, and taste everything this enchanting world has to offer in order to translate this into successful concepts that meet the wishes of tomorrow. In his presentation today, he will introduce you to the concept of Dadawan and the role of technology in his restaurants. With his team, he will zoom into the role of robots and describe challenges they are currently facing. Danny, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to the meeting. I'm Danny Deng, I'm 43. I'm born in China. I'm married, I'm 5 children, on 9 restaurants in Netherlands. When I was 5, I moved to Netherlands with my parents and my sister and brother. When we arrived here, we have nothing. And we always job in a small restaurant. I go to school, but I not really like the school. I'm stopped my study about 18 because my focus, it's not at school. I had to wait to work in my parents' restaurant, but I did not like it at that moment, the restaurant job. After I was 19, my parents bought a restaurant for me to give me opportunity. That's the way I'm going up in a restaurant. I can explain what's the other one. Like the other one is it's in the Chinese, it's like a big bowl. It's like all of Asian boys he eat in a bowl. That's why it's named the other one. And okay, my nephew going to talk about that one after the video. He's a little better in English. Thank you. Yes. Jason?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason, and I'm the nephew of Danny. And today I'm going to talk you through the concept of Data One. Me myself, I'm involved in the concept development of Data One, but not only Data One, but also of the other restaurants within the family business. Yeah, I was always involved at a very early age already within the restaurants of my parents, but also of Danny's restaurants. So I can tell you a little bit more about the concept of Data One. I can remember that the evening before we went open, that we still had to brainstorm about the menu card that we wanted to serve at the next day, actually. But yeah, luckily it turned out to be very good. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the concept. So the concept builds on 3 pillars, I would like to say. The first pillar being worldly food, small time prices. And what we want to say with that is that we serve food from all over the world. So we have steak, but we also have hamburgers, we have lobsters, we have Korean bowls, also Chinese bowls. We even have curries, and we always give our own twist to it. So you won't eat the most traditional Korean bowl at our restaurant, but what you will eat is that a Korean bowl with a twist. And the small time prices part is regarding our prices. We are positioned at a lower price range, so we want to be open for a lot of people, not only the people who can afford dining out every day, for example. Secondly, smart fusion kitchen, and what we want to say with that is that our dishes are most of the time simple. We want to use we don't want to use too many different ingredients, but still want to make a healthy and delicious dish. And we also want the dishes to be easy to make as well for our cooks, so that every cook is able to make these kind of dishes, and not only the best chefs of the world. And the third part is about multicultural. multicultural in terms of employees. So our employees are multicultural. Not only ourselves are Chinese, but we also have students from all over the world working for our restaurants. And yeah, people living in the Netherlands, but also Germany and Belgium, for example. And that's the first part about multicultural. Secondly, our dishes are, of course, multicultural. Yeah, like I said in the beginning, we serve dishes from all over the world. And the third part is that we also serve different countries. Like we also serve food for different kind of cultures. And what I'm going to talk about today is, of course, our 3 new team members at Dadawan. We hired them about 7 months ago, and the first one who I would like to introduce to you is James. So James is our host of the evening, and what he does is he measures the temperatures of the guests, and he takes he warmly welcomes the guests and then takes the guests to the table. We also have Amy. Amy is our beautiful waitress robot, and she provides our guests with drinks and small plates and dishes. And the last robot within our family is Akatar. I didn't make up the names myself, but Akatar is our beautiful Hulk robot. He can serve large plates and take a lot of heavy weight from the shoulder from our employees. And yeah, we saw different effects when we firstly introduced this somewhere. I think it was in April. First of all, we got world recognition. We saw that our not only our Facebook post, but everyone was talking about it. It got into the local news, it got into the international news, and it was even featured by the New York Times and Reuters. So yeah, it got a lot of recognition within the world. Secondly, within the other one, what we saw is that our customers love what we were doing. They had what it really created was a wow effect, and people were very excited about the robot. They wanted to come to the restaurant to see the robot, to make pictures with it, and to interact with it. And because it was something they had never seen before. And third of all, and yeah, for us also very important, of course, is social distancing. Due to the use of robots, we were also able to consider this rule of the government, where we were always able to keep distance with our customers. And we got different kind of responses from our customers. I will first dive into the positive ones, of course. It got a lot of user-generated content. So people shared the robot on Instagram, on Facebook, on Snapchat, on a lot of social media platforms. And they also wrote about it, of course, in the news. And another positive thing was that the customer saw that we could always keep in mind the safe distance of 1.5 meters. But there were also some negative aspects. So the first one is the fear of losing human interaction. For example, we also saw another news on the Facebook post that people were a little bit hesitant about the amount of human interaction that would be left when we would use robots. And the second was that, people were fearing to lose their jobs. So these were the negative points of the responses from our customers. And we also got response from our employees. What they thought was positive was it was less work intensive. They were happy with the robot because they could help them with lifting heavy stuff, and they had more time to actually provide the quality service that the customer actually needed. So the fear that the customers had is not really justified, because we even had more time to have a chat with the customer, or to explain something about the dish, for example. So actually we had more time for that. The second positive thing is that, of course, we could also for our employees, we could always keep in mind the safe distance of 1.5 meters. Two negative points that they mentioned was that they cannot be fully trusted yet. And what I mean with that is that they told us that the robot does not always do what they wanted, for example, because they are not technical geniuses, and you don't need to be a technical genius actually to move the robot, but they could not do the maintenance stuff, for example. And another thing that they didn't trust was when the robot hit a table or a chair, and that's something we don't like either, of course. And that's also the second thing, that the other one is not robot proof yet. We saw that our restaurant, we have some pretty narrow spaces where the robot cannot get through. But we also see a lot of opportunities for the future. We see a lot of opportunity in terms of customer experience. So not only experience on the table itself, but also the experience in terms of customer loyalty, customer recurring customers, and yeah, so that we can, for example, offer personalized services with our robots. Upsell and cross-sell, we can, yeah, our human employees, we need to teach them how to upsell and how to cross-sell. And for the robots, yeah, we can always, for example, do something like a pop-up, so we can steer the customer towards a bigger hamburger or another drink. And other challenges that we see is that it's twofold. One is the physics of the robot. We see that our robot is not completely functional yet. We see that, for example, in terms of appearance, it's quite a big robot, and if you have narrow spaces, it's very difficult. In terms of functionality, we still miss some things like buttons to easily, for example, tell the robot to bring a drink, for example. And in terms of stability, that we cannot put too many heavy stuff on Amy in this example on the left. And the restaurant's the infrastructure of the restaurant also face some challenges. So, for example, the floor has to be flat, and what I mean with ceiling is that the ceiling is not cannot be too high, because the robot reads the map from the ceiling. And you also see that, yeah, the interior and the construction of the interior is very important for the future. And this all we have taken into consideration in building our new restaurant. So in the beginning of next year, or actually in late next year, we will start opening a new restaurant in the Netherlands, where we actually have already considered all of these learnings that we got from the infrastructure, and we want to build a new restaurant where we can optimally make use of these robots. And this is a sneak peek into this restaurant. What you see in this video is that there is a lot of more room between the tables. The robots can move freely, and yeah, we've really taken into consideration the infrastructure within the restaurant. So that's my part of the presentation. Danny and I would like to thank you all for your attention, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you in one of our restaurants. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Danny and Jason. I think it's important to realize that we live in a country where all restaurants and bars are in a lockdown. So at the moment, I think you have a lot of sorrows on your mind how to survive. So we really appreciate all your efforts to be here tonight. And I think you wonderfully show how technology and robots in particular affect frontline service experiences, and then the customer experience and also the collaboration with human staff members. So it's really the interaction between human staff members and robots. Very inspiring research area for all of us, I think. Thanks a lot for sharing. That means that we can start our Q&A exactly on time. Thanks a lot for all respecting the time schedule of tonight. I think that some of us would love to go to bed at 11:30 p.m. Others would like to start the day. So it's a perfect timing after all. Good, we received a couple of questions in the chat. Can we start with Dietmar? The first question I would like to ask you on behalf of our audience tonight, Dietmar, is to what extent 3D printing could also be used in this restaurant setting, for instance, or in food services? Do you have any experience in that?
So myself, I don't. But I follow the literature, and actually we also have a group here at QUT who works on 3D printing of food. So that's actually also already a reality. There are now 3D printers which prepare certain types of foods which are in restaurants. It's still very rare, but that's also an application which I foresee in the next 5 to 10 years will be more and more translated into the restaurant side, because obviously there are a number of advantages. Just to give one, especially on the high-end cuisine, when you think about the complexity of how the chefs prepare the food, which is obviously all done manual. Like for any job, there is a very long training period, and one of the most important things is to do this reproducible. And that's where we know from the engineering side, automation can bring in a lot of advantages. So therefore, if you have now a 3D printer who's really printing out very complex structures, very complex recipes, if you get it right, there is a very high reproducibility. And of course, then there is also cost effectiveness in doing that. So this is where the field is moving.
Thanks a lot.
That answered my question. Thanks a lot, Dietmar, for the answer. I also see it as a very big opportunity for us as food industry entrepreneurs in the future, where we can maybe to maybe even focus more on the small time prices, where we can use 3D printing as well for, I don't know what usage, but it would be very awesome to look into this. Yeah, thanks.
Good, thanks a lot. And we can move on to the question for Monica. There's a question by Ray. Ray, I just ask it on your behalf, if you don't mind. Doesn't the world need women public policy entrepreneurs too, is Ray's question to Monica. Monica, could you reflect on that?
Oh, what a fantastic question, Ray. I love you. I'm sending lots of love to you. Of course. I mean, really the principles of design, as you know, as well as I do, is to actually consult with the stakeholders. And in part, what we've come to in the last part of the industrial age is we haven't really included, like in the Australian, for example, the Australian budget just came down, a post-COVID budget for recovery. It's almost $1 trillion of debt the country will go into over the next 5 years. Less than 1% of that investment is in things that are women industries or to support women. It all went into construction, apprenticeships, building, very male-dominated industries. So there's where for me, it's about designing inclusively for all. And the reality is, when you can see some of the examples I provided, when you design for all, you design better for everyone. So having the right mix of people, whether that be First Nations, whether that be women, whether that be people excluded from the workforce through abilities or different abilities, it's really important that we genuinely design for stakeholders. The second element in that is, how do we define success? This is the key. So governments, how do they really define success? We elect them to help us as citizens, live in a great world and have a flourishing society. But is that really what their design principles are? Or is it to get themselves re-elected? If I'm a businessman and I've got some money to invest, is my idea to get maximum return on that money in this cycle? Or is it to balance a healthy return with not doing any harm to the planet or to humanity? So definitions of success and designing for the full gamut of people impacted.
Thanks a lot, Monica. I think it's a very convincing answer. We have a couple of questions for Dada1. The first one is by Chelsea. She loves Dada1. I take that as a compliment. You mentioned, she says, that customers were fearful of losing human interaction. Were they specific, and what in particular they were fearful of losing? Was it the ability to build new relationships? What was it that the feedback of your customers was?
I will answer that question.
Thank you.
What we got back from our customers is that we also, of course, we know this as hospitality entrepreneurs, but what we got back is that people come to restaurants in order to experience service. They want to be helped. They want to sit down and be helped, and that's something they cannot experience at home. Maybe because they're alone, maybe because they're lonely, maybe they want to interact indeed with someone else, to indeed build a new relationship with someone, for example. So these were the parts that they were very fearful of losing. Losing really the service part of going out to eat something. So that was the biggest challenge. It wasn't banter, because the robot itself was banter already. So
yeah, thank you.
That answer your question, Chelsea.
Gabby, I just wonder if I would add to that from a design principle. Danny, I really love what you, Jason, what you've done is that you've made it a safe environment for now. But also, if you're thinking about the experience design, we don't have to replace the robots with humans again. We could think about how else could we bring humans into the experience for that, for your restaurants, that would have meaning and would give that same connectivity. In Australia, for us, it would be adding entertainment, or adding more greeters that, provide, that change the atmosphere. So you can bring humans into the service process for your restaurant in ways other than they were traditionally done.
Yeah, and if you look closely in the video that I just shown, there was also a cocktail shaker robot in there. And there was like one arm shaking a robot, and I think that directly reflects what you're saying, Monica, to something we indeed have been experiencing. And yeah, it would be more like a gimmick and even a better experience for our customers coming to our restaurants.
Yeah, and I think it's nice that you also recommend, Monica, to infuse humans almost in a robot environment to get the most value out of the human interaction, which would be a nice flipped way of thinking, basically. Another question for Dada1 is, what was the main motivation for hiring robots? Was it COVID, or were you already planning on that before the pandemic? And did it now help to manage also the post-pandemic service?
Of course, we didn't know that the pandemic was coming, so we didn't really plan for this. But Daniel is a very tech-savvy person. I know that when he was younger, he always got the newest iPhone, for example. But we also looked into the newest developments in terms of restaurants. There is always every year there is a conference for new hospitality developments. And he always goes to there and brings me as well to it. And the robots wasn't something that was applying during COVID wasn't something that was planned. It was something we've already been looking into for, I would say 1.5 years. So we also already got some prototypes from China We developed, with help from a developer, we developed the software for it, and yeah, we were already testing with it before COVID. So COVID was just a very nice excuse to actually launch the robots and yeah, to speed up the process of implementing it.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for sharing, Jason. Asra also thanks you for your reply.
You're welcome.
Was the question. Then finally, and then I hand over to Rebecca, a question for Data One. How would you preserve your Data One image when adopting robots in the service delivery process?
Yeah, good question. That we've been, it's actually a very actual topic that we've been discussing right now. Do we want to become that robot restaurant, or do we still want to focus on the 3 pillars that I mentioned in the beginning?
Yeah.
So it's still a discussion that that needs to be solved. Yeah, we have mixed feelings about it, because you don't, if you are that robot restaurant, that's a very nice USP. But if you are that restaurant who builds on the pillars that you've been building on for already 6 years, it's also a very nice USP. So yeah, it's something we still need to discuss. And,
and I think Monica's advice is also something to consider. Here's another question from Dominic from Maastricht. He also says very cool concept, and he sees that there are 3 different types of robots. Some are more human-like, some are more like a box. Do you see that the guest treats them differently? Maybe because some look more human-like.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. With Amy, which is behind me, when she's turned on, she also has a smiling face. Yeah, people really interact with the robot and talk to the robot, even ask questions, even though she cannot answer them. They try to order drinks, even though it cannot take orders. So you see that they interact with the robot like a human being. But the robots are not that developed to a level where they can take orders or something. But that's a future that we envision. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, and happy to walk that journey with you as service researchers. I think here. Good, thanks a lot all. It was my great pleasure and honor to be tonight's facilitator, and I hand over to Rebecca.
Great, well, thank you all very much. Outstanding session, so many interesting ideas coming through. Thank you to our 3 speakers. Thank you also to Gabby for facilitating. I'd like to give a bit of a promo now to our next and our final webinar that's coming up. And one of the things I hope that you've been noticing if you've been coming to these is that we've been very conscious of having diversity amongst our speakers. So we've had gender diversity, we've had ethnicity diversity, we've also had diversity between academics and practitioner voices. We've had an outside-in perspective, drawing on perspectives from outside of services and outside of marketing. We've had juniors, we've had seniors. And so our final webinar is going to be a panel, and I think it's a great topic, the moral limits of service markets. Just because we can, should we? And so each of our speakers is going to be talking about different moral dilemmas. We've got Abby, who's one of our postdocs at QUT, but also she founded a social enterprise to rescue women from sex trafficking in Nigeria. We've got Dr. Joe Previty, who's a social marketer from UQ, Professor Michael Schutz, who is a trauma surgeon, and then we've got Professor Maria Rossetti, who is an Indigenous woman, who is a social marketing academic from University of Sunshine Coast. And so I think they're going to pose some really interesting challenges to us and make us think about just because we can do things legally, should we do things ethically in service markets? And this is drawing on quite a well-known book actually on the moral limits of markets. So we hope that you will be able to join us for our final webinar next month. And if you're on our mailing list, you will get the Zoom details for that. So again, thank you all for coming, and we will end with a little bit of music as we say goodbye. So